Hey everyone, Dan here. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps a lot. And also keep in mind that these are my own thoughts, opinions, and ideas. These are not meant to be, nor should you take them as investment or trading advice in any way, shape, or form. Do your own due diligence, put in the work for yourself, and make your decisions based on that. Enjoy. All right, folks, here we are on Monday, September 20th, after the market has closed, thankfully. And we're going to take our daily look at SoFi. Now, SoFi coming down nearly 3.5% today on pretty solid volume. And as you know, the market overall struggling significantly today. And the NASDAQ in particular coming down 2.19%. It is probably worth taking a look at fintech innovation portion of ARK, which overall gapped down quite a bit today. If we take a look at this in the year to date, and we can probably pop these MAs off for a sec, but sort of going through a bit of, I was gonna say stagnation, and then I realized that I don't even watch the news really, but that must be hitting my psyche from all of the chitter chatter about it. But there's this sort of movement that's come up from a low back in May, and then we've just been this like really sad continuous topping out that ARK F has been going through. And so these are going to collide here in the relatively near future. Apologies for all of the screaming in the background if I'm unable to edit it out. I think the children's need some early bedtimes today. It's been a strenuous one for whatever reason. But anyway, if ARK F itself, and I know this isn't what you're here for, but just to take a look at where the overall fintech space is, at least for the tickers that Kathy Woods has decided to put into ARK F, just to say that SoFi isn't necessarily alone in any of the challenges that fintech has seen overall. But if it does continue to consolidate or compress within this smaller and smaller space of pricing, this would probably need to pop itself out early to mid-December. Now, it doesn't have to. It could certainly fall in either direction, and this will be a big test for it right here if it can come back up and fill the gap that it left at this point in time. But if it is able to hold this, I would look for it to potentially make a big move after it compresses the price action more and more tightly within the two bounds there. Now, back to SoFi. This puts SoFi on the daily in a position now where essentially it's closing below the previous trend line, and we were talking on Friday's video about the different areas of support which are now dwindling. So at that point we were saying we would have been looking at this candlestick here. We would have been saying, well, we have 1502, and then we have the 20 MA, and then we have 1411, or sorry, then we have the trend line, and then we have 1411. I'm getting ahead of myself here. But now we see with the gap down, we're already below the 20 MA, so now treating that as resistance, and now appearing to close just below this trend line. So unless that's able to be regained really, really quickly, we could see some additional struggling with the current price and 1411 to see if it needs to test that area or not. Obviously, my hope would be that I can quickly regain this trend line, and it'll just be a little brief stutter step on its way up here and potentially out of this wedge that it had been forming. But we'll have to see. Like I said, if it continues to drop, I would be looking for 1411 on the downside to be a potential catch zone. Now, I'm going to get rid of this gap because I'm tired of looking at it for funsies. So we already know now that it failed that gap. I mean, it depends the timeline that you want to say gap failures occur on. But we gave it more than a month, so I'm happy to say that it has not filled the gap. And over the course of a month, that should have been enough time, in my opinion. But I don't really know. I don't have a better color to make that. But there is this gap right here. We probably don't even need this at the moment. We can just see it. To see if it comes up and fills this gap in the coming days. I was just talking about what has gone on previously with QQQ and with SPY, and we were looking there on that chart in that video that I just did at the gap here, and just saying that previously there was this gap down here, right? And it dropped below the 20. We're in a different position now because we're below the 20 and the 50, but big gap down, and then the next day it filled that gap, and then it made another run toward the top of this channel that this has been in for several months. So you can have a look at that video if you want in the meantime, but if it'll come up and fill the gap, and if SoFi will start to act independently in any way, shape, or form, or just sort of be a cog in the wheel of the macro forces of the market in general, who knows? We'll have to watch it day by day. Today, if you look at how it acted most of the day, it's going to be pretty similar to what QQQ looked like. It took a little bit longer to start selling off, right? It chopped around here for quite some time. This is awful to look at with these MAs on there. Chopped around here for quite some time and then really made its push down, but it went through that whole burst toward the end of the day, and then it dipped into close, of course, which we didn't see on the QQQ. So a few moments of independent action, but overall just getting pulled down by the market forces in general. That actually looks pretty similar during the front half of the day as ARK F, but also ARK F didn't have the big sell-off at the end there, unless I'm just not seeing it. But who knows what that was all about, but big volume coming in there toward the end of the day. And I know folks had been asking several questions about the big volume spikes that we've seen toward the end of the day, and they've fluctuated between buy and sell volume. So I don't know. Obviously, they're timed buys that are coming in for whatever reason, but we have a lot to catch up on SoFi. I've been so compressed for time lately. It's been hard for us to get back to looking strongly or consistently at what's been going on in the dark pools. I did check last week FTDs, and there wasn't anything that was updated, or wasn't anything that seemed significant that had been updated, so we didn't really get into it in last week's videos at all. But I'll continue to take a look at those things and sort of see what might be happening. But in the meantime, for me, I'm just going to continue to look at what the overall market is bringing. I'm going to continue to look at this larger wedge and see if there's any hope of getting back in there. At this point, it's very close. It's just about a week away or less. Sort of toward the end of this week, it would be pushing itself out in one direction or the other. It might be it doing that right now. So if it is, I really hope that 1411 can hold, because if it can't, we by my estimate, we could have another full dollar to drop. We might try to catch right around this 1360 area based on these 3 or 4 candlesticks right here, but you never know. It's not as strong of a zone because it doesn't really tie back previous price action to anything else. But who knows, with the ticker symbol change and like we're talking about the macro forces of the market, you never know. I guess one thing of note, big sell coming out from insiders. You see here now, I really jinxed it, so I'm sorry everyone. But the minute that we talked about buys and sells from insiders being relatively on par, we had some big selling coming out. So we had the report from the Galileo founder, and now we have the insider selling. SoFi vice chairman sells $16.9 million in stock. So a pretty significant sell from an insider perspective, and that bringing this to be clearly wildly lopsided now. So it goes. What are you going to do? But just thought I would mention that. Not anything for anyone to do, but as everyone looks for hopeful signs when Noto buys, this isn't to say that those are bearish signs, but just, take everything with a little bit of a grain of salt and weigh your options accordingly. Short sellers still saying relatively out, just kind of letting the market forces do its work at this point. So let's hope that they don't come in to try to add pressure to something that seems to be struggling. That's certainly a concern that I'm keeping an eye on for the time being. Well, we'll see if this was a blip on the radar screen or if this is a sign of something to come in the broader markets. I don't necessarily think that this has much of anything to do with SoFi, other than it's caught up in a tough period in its life cycle if and when the market is going to struggle. So, market is going to go through periods of selling off and then bull rushing again and then selling off, as it always has, but it has always recovered. And until that changes, then, it's just sort of a matter of putting in the time and seeing where the chips land. But I don't necessarily think that this has anything to do with SoFi as a company or as a stock, other than, like I said, it's caught up in a tough time in its life cycle, being that it's in a growth phase and has barely been in the market. And so if we are to catch a little bit of a downturn, it might get a brunt of that because folks may be less apt to put money into what they view as more chancy stocks. But you never know what the market psychology is going to bring. That's pure speculation on my part, both from the perspective of if the market is going to turn south and if that's how folks would react to growth stocks in general. But we will have to see. All right, folks, so I hope that you survived the day okay, and I'm really interested to see what we get tomorrow. I appreciate you watching. I will see you in the next video.